Oh yeah, okay. So we would like to start. Does anybody have any questions? We have a bunch of really good questions if people want to let us take the lead, but like I would love to hear from anybody in the group, any questions that you might have for our panelists today. Oh, yes.
I got into UW, but I didn't get into the computer science degree. I want to be a game designer. Is there a pathway you can get to being a game designer without needing like a specific computer science degree?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's a little harder now than it used to be, and that is because of the number of resumes. So if I put an associate designer position up, we're a larger company, but not the largest for sure. We probably get 400 resumes for it. And then our recruiters dig through all of those, and they often use a degree as a basic starting filter. And so to break through that, you would have to probably have a game that you've made to catch attention without a degree. So that is another path. In the past, before there was game design degrees, making games was the way to get there. If you didn't happen to know somebody, which is the time-honored way to get a position anywhere, all the time, making something and showing that you could do it was the best way to do it. Certainly didn't have to be complete. Things like these would totally count in that direction. And that's true for any company. But these days, getting a degree is certainly an edge. It's just really hard. So reaching out to people on LinkedIn, doing as much networking as you can are some other pieces of advice that I would urge you to do. So there's probably, any given profession probably gets lots of students reaching out to them on LinkedIn, but it can't hurt to try and talk to them, and then maybe they can get you an extra pair of eyes that you might otherwise not have gotten on your resume. Maybe still the answer is no, because there's more qualified candidates for whatever reason or for that position, but at least all you can hope for is to make sure somebody actually looks at it.
I would go ahead and say that 400 number is low. I mean, we used to get like hundreds at a reading back in the day. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely competitive, but definitely having something to show, I think, is really crucial and important.
I'll add one more thing. Make it easy to see as well. So whatever it is, like the YouTube videos you did here on a playthrough, that is a way lower barrier of entry for someone wading through a lot of resumes than having to download a build. That said, all the builds worked easily that you all gave us, so either of those would be fine. I like narrated walkthroughs as well. So let's say it's a level design resume. Explain what you're trying to do. And many of you did that in your presentation. So you're doing the sort of things you'd want to do. Just make it really easy for people to see that who have never met you.
All right. Any more questions, or any of the other panelists wanted to speak to that? Oh.
So I was wondering, for future reference, would you say, so we were the ones, or the one in the warehouse, would you say we should take a little bit smaller of bite when designing the game, a little bit less to it, so that we can then focus on the core parts that you mentioned, like explaining what actually happens and don't get too caught up on the extra mechanics?
The robot in the warehouse, right, with the editor?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not so much that. If there was the most common issue we have with people fresh out of school trying to get jobs is they try a little bit of everything, and then they try to apply for a little bit of everything. And now this may not be true in indie dev, which I do not work in and have not worked in. It's all been larger companies. We're looking for highly specialized people, especially at the lower level. You're probably going to do just one thing, so you should have a resume that shows you're awesome at that one thing. If you're like, I could be a producer, or I could do audio, or I could do this, which many of you do many different jobs over your thing. Well, which one do you want to do here? And kind of the other stuff you did is not really relevant to what you're going to do. If you're be a level designer, really focus on that. And then I would say, like, in your particular case, showing that you had the editor and having multiple levels, etc., and being able to demonstrate those are more important than anything like the arcade game or the whatever matching thing. But if you're a gameplay person, I'd emphasize that. So no, the answer is not necessarily do fewer, better things. It depends what you're trying to do. Do the right things. The number is maybe a little bit to the side.
Okay, thank you.
I know there was a previous question about a degree in game design at the University of Washington, and so I know that they offer a game design certificate if you've seen that. So how would a game design certificate compare to a general degree, especially since the University of Washington doesn't offer a general degree in game design?
It doesn't really matter to me as a hiring manager. I would have to ask how our recruiting team looks at that. I think to be honest, the quality of programs varies wildly. The most common thing for somebody coming out of it successfully is what they put into it, the networking they do with usually the people who are peers in their program. You can go above and beyond no matter what you're being taught, and you can spend that time to really dig into the development process and learn what you need to learn, whether or not it happens to be what your classwork is or not. Not to denigrate the teaching at all, it's just usually the most common element is the student was really into it and went out of their way to learn as much as possible and try to apply those skills in a bunch of different scenarios. So like doing many different games or doing one game really thoroughly, etc. Minor piece of advice, if you're doing one thing, don't try to make something that normally only giant AAA companies could make. You probably won't get that far along. Like if you're trying to make a big open world RPG, the number of elements, oh my goodness, hundreds of different features make up those games. Maybe don't try to do that, even if that's your dream game. You can get there a different way. Starting as a student is probably not how you're gonna get there.
Circles and then point to the person who's reaching out.
What would you suggest for like a single person indie marketing? Like, how would you suggest that I would market a game if I were to attempt to publish it as a solo developer?
Nellie, you're in the publishing side.
Don't throw me under the bus. I mean, all I really know about publishing is like, well, one, I work in it, but you know, like, just start like looking into what is out there. Like, ID at Xbox is a, you know, kind of way to get yourself published on Xbox, but a lot of it really does kind of come down to looking for programs like that, and like self-starting on Steam and like throwing yourself out there everywhere.
I can comment to that.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So I'm a master's in game design student who is launching an indie game studio as part of my master's project. And one of my topics is exactly that conversation. How do I market my games as a solo indie developer? And my research thus far has said, get yourself a website built, get onto all the social media, and then start looking at who is doing advertising, who's writing articles about these things. Build a community. Do dev blogs, do recordings on YouTube and on Twitch, and start building that community, and then ask your community to then cross-share out over their social media channels and approach it from the grassroots. Otherwise, you can't compete with AAA studios.
Okay, thank you.
We're gonna get over there. Thank you.
What would you consider the most impactful game in your life and why?
So for me, I would say that was the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, because that game was my first open world game. And prior to that, I was mainly playing 2D side scrollers. But once I played Ocarina of Time, that kind of opened up the whole 3D world for me. And then ever since then, every game that I have played has been open world. And that's why I wanted to become an open world designer.
For me, it's probably World of Warcraft, because it's like by far the game I have sunk just a disgusting amount of hours into, like at some point in time in my life when I wasn't as busy. But also because like of the connections I formed to people in that game that I'm still friends with like 20 years later. It turned into like one of my oldest and dearest friends is someone who I met playing World of Warcraft, and then after I was working in games, helped them get a job in games as QA. And then, we're both at different studios now, but like we still play games every Thursday night together with a couple of other people that we've met. And it introduced me to like a larger subset of people that had more similar interests to me. And it really is the thing that got me into games in the first place, I think.
For me, it's a very, very old game called Return of Heracles. It was back in the early 80s. It was an era where most games were extremely linear, and if you're non-linear, you probably didn't have graphics. You were maybe a text adventure or something. In this particular game, you could play a large number of Greek heroes, but and the game was the same game with the same level and challenges, but you could play any hero in any order. You could play all of them, you could play one of them all the way through. So you could be Hercules or Heracles as they called him, Pericles, Theseus, whatever, and go do the same challenges. You didn't have to defeat the Nemean line with Hercules. You could choose one of the other heroes, or you could have them both come at the same time. And so it's something that really showed the power of being very non-linear or solving problems in different ways. And if anyone has played any of the games I've made, they'll see that left, right, and center. It was very inspirational and is to this day.
Alright, am I missing anybody? No? Should I whip out our set of questions? At least I feel like we have some good ones that are. All right, I'm going to awkwardly walk over here and make you all listen to me. So I think the first question is, give us some advice on how to apply for and get your first industry job.
So one of the things that you'll want to do is you want to make sure that you have projects to showcase, but then you also want to make sure that you're giving those projects the proper exposure that they need. Earlier was mentioned that you need to have a website. Well, when you have that website, the first thing that someone should be able to see is that project. They should be able to see what that project is, what you worked on, and if anything, like what you learned. Because a lot of times we see we'll look at a portfolio, we'll look at a website, and we don't even see the game. And it's like, if we're going through hundreds of applications, we want to see what the thing is. And then once you have our attention, you use that, and then make sure if we're watching a video, if we're playing the game, make sure it works. And then if you're doing a video, add some context. What were you thinking? Especially if you're going for game design. If you're going for game design, we want to know what you're thinking. Art, showcase that. Whatever it is, make sure it's showcased.
I'd like to yes and Tim's question and underline my advice from earlier, which is we are looking for specialists, and students generally come to us as generalists. Consider making a version of the web page for the company or the game you're actually applying for, so that you're drawing attention or drawing connections between whatever your project is and how there's skills that company could apply. So think of it from their point of view. Here's this person who hasn't made anything professionally before, maybe it's only amateur. How can I insert them into a fast-running large project and have them be able to succeed and help us grow or get something out?
So my lens looks through more the lens of narrative. So if you're applying to writing roles, attach samples or make them really easy to get to. Sometimes too, even it can be a blur if you're going through a couple hundred resumes. So you'll have to make sure it doesn't hurt to add a cover letter. There are absolutely people who I would have passed on based off the resume alone, but because I read the cover letter, it made me kind of dig into it a bit more and set up that initial hiring screen. And then two, a lot of studios, I don't know if all of them use the same tools. It will show up if you apply to every single job available. And that makes me go what do you want to do? You've applied to a producer role and the sound designer role and a game designer role and a programming role. Do you have a programming degree? I'll start to ignore those pretty quickly if it seems like you don't know what you want to do. But I will also notice if you've applied to the same role over and over again and it's been really consistent, this is what you want to do, because that stuff all gets tracked in the tools as well. I feel, and then also apply for roles that are within your actual experience range. So every once in a while, a big game studio will have a creative director or a game director role. These are massive roles, and they require a decade of experience to actually be good at them. And I think it's sometimes at small scales, at school, you will be in a role where you are the game director or the creative director for your small project. But there's a pretty big difference when you're the game director of a team of 5 and a game director of a team of 500. So you need to get some experience first. Don't apply for those types of roles, because it's hard to take those resumes seriously when you don't really know what the job is. And Kevin has something.
I want to add something.
Yeah.
If your LinkedIn says you're the CEO and co-founder of your little company of yourself, That's not super charming to us, like, because the amount of experience, to Crystal's point, that goes into this is enormous, and to some degree it feels almost disrespectful to say I've been a creative director. Like, oh, if you're actually, for industry veterans that do that, that is an 8 to 15 years at least amount of experience running teams of 90 to 200 developers. And for larger games, it could be 1,400 to 2,000 developers. And so that doesn't help. That makes it show you don't know what you're doing.
I'm looking around for more hands, don't see, oh, there you go.
So you mentioned, like if you occupy a leadership role in a smaller team, like a team of 5 or something like that, that you want to be careful how you put that on your resume or your page or anything like that. So say you are in a position where you did a school project, and for my example, at Digipen, I was the art director on my most recent project, and that did play a large role in the stuff I programmed as well as implemented from an art perspective. So I'm curious how you guys would go about trying to communicate that I did a fair amount of this without coming off as, oh, I think I have more experience than I do.
Yeah, so usually the resumes that make it really clear is they'll put game director and they'll put like bracket like team of 5. I'm like, okay, now I understand like kind of the scope and scale of like what you were doing. You're not trying to like mask it as like I was a game director. Because again, like, I mean, I don't know how many people are at ArenaNet still, but like when I left there, like Guild Wars 2 is almost 200 people. The Destiny 2 team is like 600 people. Like these teams are enormous. I mean, even my own org, there's 70 people, and sometimes I'm like, I'm not really sure who this person is, but I have to like spend a bunch of time like understanding like who all the people are. So like the scalability of those things gets really, really big really, really quickly.
Okay.
That, I don't know if you...
Yeah, the format matters too. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile or Crystal's, they'll say department head or head of design for me, for example. That is the job I have at the company I have. If your LinkedIn profile says CEO or something like that, should I compare you to the CEO of Microsoft or whatever? If not, maybe that's not what it should say. And if I see a student, age 22, just graduated college applying, and they have an art director as their title on LinkedIn, that's where it starts to feel really weird and makes it feel like that person doesn't know what they're applying for.
So is it kind of know where to put it and how to put it?
Yeah, like if on your resume, like I was art director of the student project, by all means, but it's probably more about what you did than what the title was. So trying to spice your title up as an entry-level person is not a good strategy. Later on in your career, it's all about that strategy, but not when you're coming up. You want to make what you did at the foremost, not what you called it.
Okay.
I was just wondering, how old were you guys when you got like your first like jobs in the industry, and like what point in like your career and education were you at?
I was old. We're so old. I was 25.
25?
I was 25 when I graduated. The
And you
university
got
I
a
went to.
job, right?
Yeah, I really liked it. I got a job 3 weeks out of school, but this was back in 2005 because I'm very old. And like yeah, and I was actually a little bit older in the level of people that I was working with at the time of the same rate.
I was 28 when I got my first job, and I had graduated. So I had graduated, and right after, before I even started graduated, I was networking. So once I knew that, like, hey, like I'm being serious about this, I started networking. And the first person I contacted was Nelly, right there. So this living proof that like sometimes you will have to network, and through that networking, you're gonna learn a lot. Not only are you gonna learn a lot, you're gonna meet, you're gonna meet people who can teach you like a lot of the things that you wouldn't have even thought about. So definitely, if you're like thinking about going to school or anything, like, yeah, like I've seen people who are, older than me, take associate roles. So yeah.
I was 22. I have no formal education. I was going to say education. That's fine. I don't recommend that as a path to get through, so I stumbled into a role. It was on Baldur's Gate 1. I got it because I had done a lot of writing on my own as an amateur, and I was hired as a writer, and I also played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was the Dungeons and Dragons games. So my advice to any parents in the room, if your kids are running Dungeons and Dragons campaigns all the time, that actually might be a valid replacement for college for game design, because we're still making Dungeons and Dragons games. One of the biggest hits of last year was Baldur's Gate 3, which is a sequel to a game that I made, Baldur's Gate 2. Like, so still to this day, playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and being a proper nerd might be a way to get through regardless of what your college degree is, but I'm not going to actually advise that path. Maybe getting an education is still the smartest way to do it, or I was just lucky.
I was 30, and so I had like an entirely different career, like in the comic books industry, that I left because it just was a little unstable and it wasn't paying well, and that was definitely a good decision where it's not a great industry to be in, unless you're like the top. So I went to games instead, which has been great. And I got lucky, like I knew someone who worked in games and they were in QA, and they kind of coached me through like what an interview loop would look like. And then I was really on my own once I got in the door, so it required me to just learn and absorb everything to like get my career advancement there.
Ellie's getting her steps in today.
Yes, I am.
Hi. What is something that you think is wrong with this industry, and how would you, in your professional terms, change it?
Remember, you are
Glad we're
on
not
camera.
filming this. Something wrong with the industry? I'm trying to think of something that's industry-wide to say. I think we've gotten to this weird cost point in AAA where everything has gotten so expensive, every single element from the technology that you borrow to pay of people to health insurance to everything, at least in this country, that the entry price to making a game, and you're seeing this reflected, so there's been some hard times in the games industry right now. You'll see a lot of big companies doubling down on sequels to known hits. And the funding for indie things or startup devs is drying up really fast right now. And that will change. It'll go back and forth. It's a wave. It's happened before. It'll happen again. The 2008 giant market crash was the last time. It's the same thing. Go to core competencies, which means make Call of Duty games and nothing but, or whatever your company is, your equivalent of that. And so we're shying away from taking risks right now. But part of it is because for the biggest games might cost you, including your marketing costs worldwide for like 18 different languages, might cost you $650 million to make a game. But if it's a hit, you might get a half. And so if it's a failure, there's no surprise that many thousands of people, including those who aren't working on the job or on the game at all, lose their jobs because the cost was so enormous. And so that's probably, you have these runaway hits that people always reference, like the biggest one ever is probably Minecraft, which was a small game. And then people have tried to capture that lightning in the bottle and do that, and the Minecraft killers and all that sort of thing. You'll find the industry does that a lot. Somebody will take a risk, it'll pay off, and then a bunch of big publishers will then try to follow that and capitalize on it. And that's not necessarily wrong or right. It's just you can hardly ever turn that into a new thing. But you see that for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the stock market that drives it or whatever, people keep trying to do that. So it's more responsive than proactive. And if we could be more proactive and make wise investments or somehow lower the costs of some of these things, and I'm not exactly sure how to do that, it's easy to say and hard to do, that would probably make a big difference. One piece of advice would be for America to have a national health system like every other advanced country in the world, so that your job and your ability to survive survivable illnesses isn't tied to enormous personal and studio cost.
I thought we were going to get some other answers, but I guess not.
My question is sort of similar to the last one, but I've heard a lot of stories from people in the industry, and I was just kind of wondering, what's a good way to navigate through this industry when it's like there's so much misogyny and transphobia and stuff? And, yeah, I don't know.
I can dig at that. I mean, I would say the way that I've survived in this industry for 20 years is I learned some toxic behaviors in the beginning, like masking, which was terrible, and then I got a little bit, more senior, and I realized that kindness is basically the most important thing that has worked for me getting to where I am today. I just assume best intent with everybody, and I've definitely had things where being spoken over at meetings, and other people maybe getting credit for the ideas that I just said, and that really sucks. And it also it's really important to surround yourself with people who will speak up for you. And I would say that these days the game industry is actually getting a lot better at that. So you try to find a company that has great culture and cares about their employees, and usually they hire really great people, and those people will stick up for you and it will happen, sometimes, but that's been my personal experience. It's just making sure that you are surrounding yourself with positivity.
I think there's some boundary setting too. If you're working at a company that's not going to stand up for you, if you're having issues with that, then you need to question if that's the right company. I think my time at Bungie has been immensely inclusive in terms of how we're thinking about making sure anyone, regardless of their background or how they identify, can feel that they can come to Bungie and work here and feel like it's a safe place. And it's not perfect. I don't know if there is a perfect place, but there is just look for companies that are also just meaningfully trying to make it better for everyone to work there.
You'll usually be able to suss that out in the interview too. It's definitely you ask those direct questions, because as much as they're interviewing you, you are interviewing them because you are giving them your time and passion. So yeah, all right, there you go. Anybody else have anything? Oh, yeah, of course. No, one question only, sorry.
So, if I were to release an indie game and it had around 50 to 100 hours of content, what would you advise for the pricing of that game?
If it's not Nelly, it's no one. I don't work in that space at all.
I don't either. I don't talk about pricing. I'm not reading the pricing. Yeah.
We don't know.
No, sorry.
You need to look at the market that you're trying to target. So the pricing, for any games, the pricing is going to change based on your targeted platform and the market. If you're targeting VR and you're specifically targeting the Oculus, you're going to set one price point versus you're targeting the Xbox or PlayStation or PC. And then mobile is so insanely competitive. Good luck there.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to start to wind down a little bit. I think we can probably end on one more question if anybody has one, or I have a pretty.
Oh, all right. Yeah. No pressure, make it good.
So I would prefer a response from all three. What is your favorite color?
So we just need the blanks and there's the blanks.
My favorite color?
Yes, your favorite color.
Green.
That's also mine.
Black.
It's not a color, it's not a color, Kevin.
Blue.
Let Kevin have this moment. Let Kevin
I
have this
have
moment.
no formal education, so I wouldn't know that.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think we are going to wrap it up. I had such a good time today. I'm going to speak for the judges and say they did too. I know I heard so much chatter about how much they loved all your projects while they were playing them. I want to thank Jim and Scott and Leanne and so many other teachers that I may not have met in person yet, and all of the students, and just thank you so much for, playing along. So have a great weekend.